Hey, this is the Well Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is the topic of why do revolutions keep on failing? So for this video, I'm going to explain in a simple and straightforward way the topic of why do revolutions keep on failing, whether they're social revolutions or violent revolutions, in order to provide advice for people who are oppressed groups of people, whether it could be based on their oppression for a bad leader, or it's based on the race, ethnicity they're a part of, advice on understanding if you have a revolution, how to actually do it properly, and as a result, be able to live successful, happy lives instead of living a life that sucks ass, like a lot of nations that have actually had revolutions, okay? So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the first of the 3 points of why revolutions tend to fail, is simply bad ideologies. In other words, communism, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, like anything in the world, when people are full of a lot of anger and hate, specifically due to rich people, when they don't have a lot, the truth of the matter is, rich people tend to be the ones who are the easiest targets to blame, which I can't really blame people for thinking that, because in the end of the day, rich people tend to have a habit of not just being rich, but bragging about how much they have and stuff, and being straight up rude and disrespectful to people, which makes it very easy for people to say, fuck, I hate these people. I really hope we can kill these people off, which, to be quite blunt and honest with you, I can't really blame people for thinking that way and even wanting things like that to happen. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to that particular topic and issue, there's a difference between we're going to get rid of the ruling class, which I can't really blame people for thinking that way, versus we are going to embrace a mindset, an ideology that has consistently shown time and time again to consistently freaking fail, which is communism. Every nation that has ever embraced communism, look it up yourself, for the past literally 100 plus, I think even less than 100 plus years, any nation that has ever embraced communism since the 1920s, I believe, was when the first communist nation, which was Russia, was established. Every single one of them collapsed, to be quite blunt and honest with you. Every single one of them collapsed. And it's because their way of teaching you how to do things doesn't work, the way they understand how finances doesn't work, and it just doesn't really work. It never has worked and never will work, to sum it up. Communism is an ideology that just screws everything up it touches. It doesn't work in real life. You cannot live in a world where everybody has the same amount of everything, and obviously you need to have a system that encourages people to want more, so they work harder and come up with the best ideas and so on and so forth possible, so they can help advance the society, which is competition. Well, communism hates competition, which is actually really stupid and encourages societies to be stagnant and not really get anywhere, So in truth, communism is a shit fest. It has never worked and it never will work. And because it just creates economies that just are based on people just caring about just eating and drinking and just basic amenities for survival, and they tend to always collapse economically because there's not anything that encourages people to buy a lot. And that's the truth, and that's why their ideology is a complete shit fest, okay? So that's the truth of the matter, okay? And obviously if you're revolutionary, that's part of an oppressed group of people, like Black people, Latinos, Native Americans, whatever you can imagine. One of the worst things to happen is for you to have a nation, or in other words, it's to have a revolution, in this case more like a social revolution, specifically for Blacks and Native Americans, and you don't really get anything from it. You don't really enjoy it because you got what you got and it failed. And not just for them, but for any group of people throughout the world, okay? So if any of these groups of people have a revolution, Blacks, Native Americans, Latinos, or any group of people throughout the world, one of the worst things to do is to embrace an ideology that's going to encourage them to fucking do terribly, in honesty, to be quite blunt and honest with you. And that's my first point, okay? Which, of course, as I'm coming close to the end of my first point, the question comes up, what exactly is the solution? Because there is a lot of corruption out there. Well, the best solution is to embrace capitalism, but you have to do it right. The best way to do it is to focus more on trying to figure out what can we do to prevent people from being corrupt. There are very effective measures and methods to prevent corruption. The best way to prevent corruption, in all honesty, is not only to have good anti-corruption measures, like always monitor what people are paying for, but also teach people how to have good willpower. Which I'll eventually get to much more in another video one of these days in the future. But you want to teach people like the consequences of being greedy and how it screws everything up. So you want to have people who are able to learn how to control their urges for greed and honesty, as well as, of course, anti-corruption measures. And if you do that properly, then you shouldn't have any problem. And that's the honest truth of the matter, okay, when it comes to having a capitalist revolution. And that's my first point, okay? The second point, of course, is simply down to lack of vision. Now, this one is definitely very true for black revolutions in general, which, of course, specifically for ones in Africa, are unanimously violent, which of course, should come as no surprise, they're violent. And these ones tend to actually be due to the fact that African leaders, and it's for other parts of the world, but specifically Africa being a perfect example because it happens so often, they tend not to have a vision. Because when you have a revolution, what is your vision? What do you want to do afterwards? The basic things, obviously, that's going to be focused on is what are you going to trade? What are you going to do to feed the people? What are you going to do to not only feed the people? How are you going to pay off all the damages and stuff? But most importantly of all, of course, no shit, if you understand history, specific revolutions like the French Revolution, so on and so forth, the biggest thing you want to focus on is how can we feed people after it's done, as well as pay people afterwards, okay? That is the $1 million question. How do we pay people and feed people afterwards? And a lot of them don't have any vision, whatsoever. They don't know what they're going to do. They're just like, well, we'll just see how things go. And it creates chaos, and people who once allies turn into enemies, and they start killing each other, and everything starts falling apart, okay? So that's the second reason why oppressed groups of people, when they actually get revolutions, tend to fail, because their leaders don't have a vision, okay? And obviously the best way to solve this problem is that when you are going to conflict, have an idea of exactly what you want to do after it's done. And not just an idea, like have specific metrics, like how many people are there in your nation? How much food can you give out to people a day? With the amount of food you have, okay? Not only that, how much food can you give out to people, but also things like, how much clothing, how much access to bathrooms, and so on and so forth you have to people, but specifically making sure people are fed and people, of course, are paid. How much money can you pay each individual? Okay? And most likely, common sense would indicate you're going to want to pay them as equally as possible and feed them as equally as possible. So it's less likely there's jealousy and drama and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's my second point. Okay? So now on to the third point, of course, why revolutions tend to fail. It's just simply, another reason why this tends to happen a lot, aside from the first two I mentioned, is just simply down to just dumb leaders. Like leaders who are just dumb. Like they're just dumb. They're just greedy, they're incompetent, they don't know what the hell they're doing. It's kind of similar to vision, but this one is a bit different because they're just dumb and they're just greedy. In other words, to be more as specific as possible, they're just really dumb. Okay, they have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea of what to do. The only thing they're probably good at is like really just killing people, which is why they won. And now they took over everything, and they're just like, I have no idea what the fuck to do because they're dumb. They're dumb, and As a result, the people actually suffer. And as a result of them being dumb and they can't figure out what they do, they become lazy. And as a result, they start partying and drinking and, of course, becoming corrupt. And then it just pisses people off at some point and starts thinking, okay, we're going to have another revolution, anywhere from a few months to a few years to even a few decades. Okay. And that is the honest truth of the matter. So, in short, to deal with that one, it simply comes on effect. Make sure you have a good leader, and you won't have someone who fucks things up in that way. The third example, okay? So anyway, this is my video. Those are the 3 reasons why revolutions tend to fail. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. And just remember, if you like this video, remember to thumbs this video up and hit the subscribe button. And this is all I have to say, and simply put it out of my mouth. So bye.